Committee meeting of October 21st to order. Present by roll call. Corey?
Corey Evans here.
Katie?
Present. Katie Dugan.
Chris?
Chris Peisch, present.
Present. Susan Franklin. Okay, so if we look at the agenda, I guess we're ready for Don, unless anybody has anything they want to talk about before he comes on.
That's great.
Okay.
Gonna grab my coffee.
Hi, Don.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm sorry. I think I just realized an error that I made. I think this was set up as a meeting. Therefore, the people in the waiting room can't see it. It's not a webinar. So if you don't mind, I'd like to promote everybody so everyone can hear the meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
So the participants were able to be here, but they could, okay. So do we have to continue to monitor anyone that jumps in for public? If anyone else in the public logs in, we'll have to.
Yeah, I'll monitor that, Corey, so you can run the meeting. So you and Susan can run the meeting.
Wait, okay, in case you drop off. Okay, I just wanted to know. Gotcha.
Okay, Don, welcome. Appreciate you coming tonight.
Sure,
Can you hear me all
sure.
right?
Thanks for
Because I have
having me.
these headphones really are annoying. Yeah, so we gave you sort of a list of what we were looking to cover. So if you just want to get started talking a little bit about the fund and the fund balances, a little bit about prior appropriations that may be available, and debt in the debt service situation, that'd be great.
Sure. So I'll give you a quick overview of the fund. So before I was a finance director in Cohasset, the way the fund worked was that an annual appropriation of about $2 million every year would be put into the capital stabilization fund within your annual budget article. And then your subsequent articles for capital improvements would then transfer the funds out and put them into a capital project fund. So annually, $2 million is appropriated at annual town meeting. Historically, that's pretty much all been within the tax levy, and looking at FY25 budget, that's the same approach. It does look like an additional 100,000 was transferred for FY25 using free cash. So you guys actually increased your appropriation to 2.1 million for 25. And really the fund, at first I thought it was kind of weird how the town did it. Transferring a big bucket of money into capital and then appropriating it from it. But it really became, I think, quite smart to do it that way, because it was a good transparent way of seeing the funding going into the fund, because that is a stabilization fund, as you know, carries over balance year to year. So that's an accumulation of funds, not just a 2 million. So it was really good to see the money going in, the transfers coming out, and then within that fund also we accounted for any debt service that capital budget had approved. And so that would be an annual transfer into the general fund as well. So there's kind of multiple levels to just your annual operating budget and how the transfers between the funds work. But basically it's a annual transfer into the fund, a transfer out of the fund to cover any debt service that capital budget has incurred, and then transfers out of the fund for any capital projects approved with funding from capital stabilization. I see Katie has a question already.
I do. I just want to, especially since Chris is new and I'm sort of getting back up to speed, make sure I'm looking in the right places in terms of like how to follow those transfers in. So we said that 2.1 million or thereabouts was transferred in, 100,000 from free cash flow, and then the balance from the operating budget. is the right way to sort of add that up, if you look in the 5-year forecast at the back of the warrant, there's a line that says transfer to capital stabilization. I presume that's the number that's going from the operating budget or the tax levy into capital stabilization. And last year that was 1996060. And then if you look in Article 7 of the same warrant, that's when they talk about transfers into stabilizations fund, but it was confusing to me because it said it was from free cash and FY25 budget, and so you didn't know from that one line what was what. I guess you could have done the math, but so if I'm thinking about this correctly, the 2096060 that's in Article 7, if you subtract from that what's in the operating budget, you were left with the $100,000 that came in from cash. Is that the way to think about it? Don, you're on mute. Sorry.
Don, you're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it's always been done. It's been a capital transfer in the stabilization article. So it doesn't come out of the operating budget article, even though it's in the 5-year forecast as such. It's just the way the articles are broken up. So to get to your total budget, you kind of have to take, I think it's Article 4 plus the stabilization transfers, and that should get you to what your annual budget is.
Yeah. But that cash that in the 5-year forecast, that 1996060 that's being transferred in, I know it's not coming from the operating budget, but it's coming from that year's projected tax levy, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
So I think of the operating budget as everything covered under your tax recap,
Yeah.
right? So all your taxes, local receipts, transfers from other available funds.
Yep.
To me, that's your operating budget. And so part of your operating budget, when you're looking at it, is your funding to your various stabilization or special funds.
Gotcha.
That's the way I look at it. You might look at it a different way, but ultimately when you go in to do your tax recap and what you're going to be taxing your residents, that's all factored in there. And especially, so that 19 is within your tax levy. You are correct.
Okay. I mean, it's how we get to that, whatever, 58 million of our quote unquote sources in terms of financing sources, is tax levy plus other funding sources. Okay. That
Yeah,
makes sense to
exactly.
me. I guess the debt service piece of it is a little confusing to me. Like that piece I don't understand in terms of how to think about that. Because I know that some of the debt service that the town incurs is related to capital budget and other pieces are not related to capital budget.
Right. So the way that's been tracked is basically anything that capital budget has approved for debt service. Now, again, that's a couple times maybe since I've been there. Once, I think in FY21 and maybe once before that. So there haven't been many times that debt has been issued from capital budget in the last 5 or 6 years, I believe. So I think FY24 or 25 had about $500,000 of debt service related to capital approved projects.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. So really you got a $2 million appropriation going into the fund. And in the same article, you're transferring 500,000 back into the general fund to cover that debt service. And so that's why when you look at that 5-year forecast, if it's still being done the way I'm thinking, is that you have debt service related to your tax levy or within your tax rate, debt service from debt exclusions, and then capital stabilization debt service. And so that should be, the transfer in should basically be what that debt service for capital budget debt is. So if it was 500,000 debt budget, you should see a $500,000 transfer coming in from capital stabilization. Now, I know in 24, the previous finance director, I guess 2 directors ago now, she did it slightly different, but historically that's how it's worked, Katie.
Okay, because that was the piece that I couldn't quite follow. I knew that the number was around 500,000, but I couldn't find a number like that in the 5-year forecast. There's other numbers. They have now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines for debt and interest under shared budget details. And there's debt and interest with no name. There's debt and interest town hall. There's debt and interest private road betterment, which I presume is that one road off Forest. There's debt and interest for CPC Beechwood, and there's debt and interest excluded for public safety building. So I couldn't quite find the debt and interest associated with capital budget specifically. Corey and Susan, I don't know if you know historically where we've gotten that number.
Yeah,
A
so,
couple- Go ahead.
go
Don.
ahead, Susan.
No, I was just
pull
gonna
up
say
the
it's a couple of
24.
items that we had bonded. I think one of it was a large piece of equipment, but remind me.
Let me just look real quick. So
Maybe a fire engine?
your, yeah, okay. Yeah, the forecast was changed a little bit,
Yeah,
from the way we would have
that
done
you
it before.
would, you and I were so used to it.
So, and again, so that's, I think, because Jen wanted to try to, she didn't like the idea of having these transfers and additional, entries to book.
Yeah,
So she kind of, it got changed a little bit, but still, the kind of, that's how it should be working. So if I look at Article 4, and again, just, I was not here in any of this preparation for any of these budgets. I'm more of a, here for historical purposes, I guess, so I'm not quite
Yeah.
up to speed on too many new things that might have changed, but yeah, so 539,087 in Article 4 was transferred from Capital Stabilization Fund. That would be the debt service related to FY 24. Sorry, 25. So there would be a breakdown somewhere to get you to that number, Katie.
okay,
Now, there used to be a capital stabilization spreadsheet maintained where it would just show you carryover balance, new appropriations into the fund, any interest earned to date as you're kind of analyzing it. I think we'd probably look at it, during special town meeting, annual town meeting. So the interest on that fund would be updated. Any projects that were approved would be included in that spreadsheet. But then also the debt service amortization is also in that spreadsheet. So that's where you pull those numbers from specifically to get that.
gotcha.
One of our
And
goals
we
is
don't
to
have that
rebuild that.
spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need that.
Yeah, that's got to get rebuilt. So yeah, that's part of it. But one of our goals. Yeah.
What was
Yeah,
that spreadsheet? What was that spreadsheet called, Don?
I think it was capital stabilization analysis. I
Okay.
can look on the server at one point and try to find the most updated copy of it
Mhm.
Okay,
and share that with you.
that'd be great to sort of have the last version that we can kind of work from.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, it might be a version from 2022 when I last updated it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
it's still
that's
easy
fine.
enough to follow through the transactions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can I just ask a procedural question, Michelle, if you're still there, as to who in the finance department could help us update that once we sort of agree on the format?
So I think the town accountant would be the person to help with that, or the assistant accountant could help with that.
Do we
Yeah, I
have
mean,
do we have a town accountant right now? I thought we were using third-party services.
We have a town accountant now.
We have a
Currently,
Yeah, a few weeks. We a new person came under a few months now. A few weeks.
I mean, it shouldn't take that long to put together.
yeah, so Dawn, I'm gonna look for the sheet because I think you sent it to me. So I'm trying to find it right now.
okay, yeah, you're right. I think I did send it to you.
You did last year, so let me see if I can get a hold of it.
All
Okay.
right, and I mean, it really isn't that hard to update. I mean, I could spend a few minutes updating it. It's really just pulling your town meeting votes and whatever the interest earned and transferred. So that wouldn't really be a big deal.
Okay.
Now,
And
of
then the
course,
other,
this
the
is
other
all,
bucket
this,
would, sorry, go
this is
ahead.
all outside of the new stabilization funds, just to be clear.
Mhm.
So this
Yep.
is totally outside of those two other new funds that you guys established.
This is
So-
just capital stabilization only.
Yeah,
Right.
Correct.
yeah. Just
Yeah,
wanted
so
to,
Don, one discussion we've been having behind the scenes is no longer having that level set. I do know that part of the level setting was because the debt service was coming off, so the available spend was kind of growing. It kind of made it kind of come out in the wash. We're kind of running out of that kind of goodwill. So part of the 2096 appropriation was to kind of get us to a 2.5% kind of adder. So I'll work with the select board and Chris because that and Katie pointed out perfectly that it needs to be in that kind of budget forecast. I mean, from my point of view, it's just kind of good behavior. That way we don't assume we have more money than we do, unless there's some other mechanism here if I'm off base about that, I'm just kind of asking, is that like kind of a good way to go to kind of have this grow with the rest of the funds as well?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you see in inflation, your buying power has decreased
Right.
over the last few years. So
Mhm.
that $2 million is not the same $2 million now.
No.
I mean, I remember when I was leaving around July of 22, and some of the projects that were getting put forward, the quotes versus the bids that came in were way off base.
Crazy.
So,
Yeah.
So you're right, trying to increase that incrementally to try to at least grow with your tax levy increase will help that. Again, every extra bit that you can afford to put in there will help the whole capital plan.
Yeah.
But at least
Well,
try to keep up with inflation.
And of course, everyone's squeezed. I think everyone's budget's squeezed, and that's just kind of how municipal finance works. But at a certain point, even if we're getting squeezed both on the spending power, the buying power, as well as just the requests, it's kind of getting squeezed from both directions, which is not a long-term
Sure.
strategy.
What I would love to see is just a short financial policy that's put in place that sort of codifies that 5% increase to the extent that that's possible. I mean, it was great that it came in through a combination of the tax levy and the $100,000 kicker from free cash flow. But free cash flow ebbs and flows, and we were, it was not a happy accident, but it's not necessarily guaranteed that there's always going to be $100,000 excess free cash flow available to sort of grow it at 5%. And so
2.5 is what I was
that has to
suggesting.
be, I think getting it in a format where we've got it in writing, we have a conversation with the select board, we have a conversation with advisory, an attempt to make that part of the budget message perhaps for this year, like a goal for the select board, a goal for capital budget is to get that codified. And I don't mind having financial flexibility built in that they could fund it, partially out of free cash flow, but I want to see the commitment for the 5% increase. It's sort of like what we did with OPEB, where we didn't lock it in saying you have to do it one way or another, but here's the funding target. You're locked into the funding target. How you get there, we're going to give you the flexibility of doing it out of the operating budget tax levy or out of free cash flow. And the goal has always been to do, a split on that front for OPEB, but there could be a similar conversation around capital stabilization too.
Mhm.
Absolutely, and you guys do transfer additional funds at special town meeting almost every year.
Right.
To capital stabilization. So just looking back, your 12/31/21 STM didn't actually put it to capital stabilization, but that was when there were heavy discussions about town hall. So 750 was put aside in a one-time cost article. If that didn't happen, I would anticipate that would have gone to capital, or something similar would have probably gone to capital stabilization, because I think that year we had a high free cash.
Yeah, we had that.
certification.
We had that weird tax.
Yeah, and then in December of 22, you guys put 625 into capital stabilization, and then this last November of 23, you guys put in 500. So you guys do put a significant amount extra in based on free cash. But to your point, it does ebb and flow, so you can't always count on that.
We
But
can't count on it.
that might be a good idea, like the OPEB is trying to come up with a set amount and then figure out between annual
Gotta get there.
and special how you get to that number.
Mhm.
Just one question for you, Don, because we were talking about the the ins for fiscal 25 being the 100,000 from free cash flow, the 1,996,060 from the tax levy, which got us to the 2.1. Is there a balance that ever exists? I mean, it obviously rolls from year to year. It's a balance sheet. So I guess it sort of begs the question, did we have an opening balance that we were adding to? And what was that? Because we spent 3.3 million in appropriations in Article 8 or whatever. So we had to have some cash.
Yeah, so. Yes, there's always a
Long Blake.
balance. Yeah, you know where it's going, Corey. So,
Yeah,
so yeah, there is a balance every year. So
Okay.
right now I'm looking at a balance of 1.5 in the fund. That's because the appropriations at town meeting have not been taken from that yet. So technically you got a 1,000,005 balance. You got 2.1 coming in, and then you just appropriated 1.8 from capital stabilization. So what's the math on that? 1.5 plus 2, you had 3.6 minus 1.8. So there's always a balance.
What's the
The amount
minus
of-
one? I'm sorry, what's the minus 1.8?
The 1.8 is what your town meeting approved for funding from capital stabilization. You might have that big number that you're talking about, but you got, I think if I saw it right, 450 was coming from the school capital fund.
Correct.
900 grand was coming from your roads and sidewalk stabilization. So that big number that you're referring to is not all just the general capital stabilization fund.
Okay. Oh, I see. Oh, there's the 900,000 that would have come from that. The 150 for the engineering study would have come from the schools.
correct.
And
Here.
I
this
think
is
that's,
the-
anything else?
Does this help at all?
Yeah, so general fund or general government, yeah, you're about 1.8 from capital stabilization, the 450 from school stabilization, 900 from roads and sidewalks. Pardon me, and then $111,000 reappropriation of a prior article.
Tree carved out. But in addition to the cash balance, there's also a rolling amount that is kind of a goal to not go under. We talked about that last cycle of about $1 million.
Right, so the cash balance and the fund balance are the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
It's gonna be, so you're rolling cash, you're rolling fund balance, it's the same thing in this situation, because there's no other liabilities or assets within a capital stabilization fund.
Yeah.
So we used to try to get $1 million to stay in the fund every year. And my understanding, the way, what I always thought of that was more of a policy towards your stabilization policy itself. So not because we needed the money between town meeting and July 1st, more of the town's financial policy states that 15%, we shoot for 15% of the prior tax levy to be within our stabilization funds. So that would be your general stabilization, your capital stabilization. That's what specifically stated in the policy. Historically, I would include the couple $1,000 as some facility stabilization fund, and then the sped reserve fund. Even though it's set up as the sped reserve fund under the new law, I still included it because it's more of a stabilization type account, in my view. It's there to help and assist for sped related needs based on a policy specific to that as well. You could easily take that out of the calculation. It's not going to really impact the percentage.
I thought
If I
that,
look at your balances right now, you're at 16% of your prior year tax levy in stabilization funds.
but is it, when that financial policy was built, I thought that 15% of the tax levy was the general stabilization fund, not the capital stabilization fund? Or are you aggregating general, capital, sped, OPEB, all of that?
No, not OPEB.
Okay.
Just the sped. I mean, sped's only at 99,000 at the end of 24. Again, you could take that out of this calculation. It's not specifically stated in your policy. Historically, because of the type of fund it is, really is a reserve fund.
Yeah.
You're not gonna use it every year, except for maybe you guys have used it the last few years because of,
Yeah.
again, you never know with special education. But-
Yeah, no.
And your policy does specifically state, unless it got updated in the last 2 years, which I don't think it did. I pulled up one of the most recent budget books, and the financial policy document in there did specifically say 15% of the prior year tax levy, including general and capital stabilization fund.
Okay,
I
So it's
think we
really
did at one
general-
point.
general and capital stabilization and the denominator is the tax levy. Got it.
Yep, prior year tax levy. Now, that
Yeah.
calculation will get a little modified probably for you guys in the future, as when you look at your tax levy now going forward, it's gonna include
Hmm,
the school
Mhm.
and roads and sidewalks.
good
so-
point.
But again, that's an easy calculation. You take the recap, the tax
Yeah.
levy,
Right.
and you subtract those two out and you compare it to your other stabilization balances. Because I'm assuming based on the policies and procedures you put in place with these new funds, that's really a separate item. And I don't think you'd probably include that. Again, that's up to you guys, but because that's gonna skew those percentages really big if
Right.
you guys are saving
If those are
money
included,
for a big school project
Right.
and you start accumulating millions of dollars.
gonna make us
that's
look like
gonna
we're
really-
doing a better job than we are. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's still
So-
gonna look good to the rating agencies that you have that money aside.
So
So then when they
let's-
calculate it, they might pull those numbers into when they're looking at it. But for your internal policy, I don't know if you want to.
Let's pivot to the stabilization funds. We've already used a half hour unless, Susan, you got other stuff that you want Don to get to.
No, I think that was very good, Don. That was clear. Good questions, everybody.
All right,
I think we're ready.
for the special funds, Don, you weren't here when we really launched them. I don't know how familiar you are with how they were set up. But if you have any current data on, since we launched them in FY 24, we should have a little bit of a rolling bump of funds here. Do you have kind of current balance of those funds handy? Talk a little bit about any of that stuff.
I don't, only because I don't know if all the entries have been booked. I know because you guys didn't do. Yeah, the way that you guys did the annual town meeting vote this year, you didn't pull out any specific items to be available as of town meeting. So you guys have to wait to July 1 to even spend any of the money and wait for that new appropriation. So
Yeah.
I'm confident that the general and capital stabilization balances are good. I just don't know if all the transfers for the other two projects have been done yet. So
Okay.
if I pull up the general ledger, I see 1.5 million in.
There's nothing else. Okay. And we don't have to deal with that today, so we'll deal with that when it comes due. But okay, I just wanted to see where you were caught up on that. So okay.
Yeah, and I guess just one other thing too, the debt, we had talked about the debt briefly. Most of the town capital budget didn't want to really deal with that. They wanted to kind of focus on cash. At one point, there was a discussion, and I don't know if anything had changed since I left, but there was a discussion, I think Sam Wakeman started talking about, was maybe having thresholds of if it gets to a certain amount to start considering bonding.
Right.
And just kind of layering it into your plan so that financially it works. I think when we bonded the last time in 21, we only did it for 5 years. So it didn't have a long-term impact on your ability to appropriate projects.
But it
Yeah.
didn't wipe out that year's budget and allowed us to do something big.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Yeah, that's certainly a policy I think we should dive into as we get our feet under us to kind of say what we're comfortable with and to kind of set the rules of engagement on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Chris, any questions for you? Since this is a giant data download, so just wanted to pause for you. You're on mute though.
You're on mute.
Sorry. I've been taking a lot of notes. I'll have to come back to somebody with some good background on some of this, but I think I'm following things.
Okay.
Well, and Don's gonna update the analysis report, which will have all these numbers on it, and then
Right.
when you see it in, you know, in writing, it'll be easier to follow.
Right. Good.
Perfect. Any other questions?
I guess my only question is around timing for free cash flow. And it's probably not fair to put you on the spot, Don, because you're not doing the books this year, but since we have gotten free cash flow transfers in, you know, anywhere between $500 to $750,000 at special town meeting, it's sort of a critical thing as we head into that cycle for us to plan out for fiscal, because it's part of the equation in terms of how much will we have as a beginning balance when we enter into the real budget conversations. So I guess that's sort of my loaded question, maybe not for you, but loaded for the town, as to like, when are we going to know that number, or this, even an estimate, not even the certified number, so that we can have a sense as to whether, after you cover OPEB, which is going to be around 350,000, and other one-time expenses, what is the reasonable number for capital expect?
Right, yeah, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
I mean, initially looking at it, it looked like you guys were in good shape, but there were a lot of factors and information that I didn't have at that point, so I'm not even comfortable giving an estimate at this point, and
Yeah,
especially with
Fine.
the other consulting group kind of taking over as a closeout team. Depending on what they find, or maybe appropriations not posted, etc. I really can't give a
Yep.
good estimate.
Yeah.
Okay,
Gotcha.
I guess I would, Susan and Corey, just put that on our like big follow-up list, because
Revisit. Yep.
for sure.
Let
I
us
mean,
know as soon as you have it, and make it soon. Yes.
Well, I mean, in all fairness, if we're trying to finalize the warrant in 2 weeks, I mean, that's a major article for year end. So it sort of factors into a bunch of conversations. But certainly warrant is a big one.
So I mean, I
Appropriate
know that
spend it, so.
DOR will work their hardest to get free cash done once it's submitted, if you guys have an upcoming meeting. It's one of their big first questions on their balance sheet checklist is, when is your next special town meeting?
Okay.
So I know that the closeout team's working hard on getting everything set. I don't know their time frame, but I know DOR will work their hardest to try to get it done for you for your town meeting.
It's
Okay.
like airport security. When you get a flight in 10 minutes, you get waved through. Best part, but it seems to work out.
Is there a drop dead date for DOR in terms of when we have to submit our financials?
No.
Okay.
No.
What about missing certified revenue? I mean, we did that one year back in 2010. Before you.
Missing.
Yeah.
So you can do, they allow you to resubmit a balance sheet if for some reason you screwed it up or you missed something.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened with the revenue situation that you're talking about, but I've had clients that, for whatever reason, small town, they didn't get their tax bills out till May. So they didn't collect really most of their real estate until the next year. The DOR lets you do an entry to kind of, it's called a 60-day receipt entry. You can accrue some revenue. Again, 2010, I wasn't there, so I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but there really isn't a drop dead date for balance sheet. It just gets into, they switch gears to certifying tax rates real soon. So that's kind of like, that's what you're up against when you're getting the balance sheet in a little bit later.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine. Yeah, I think for me, it's really getting a draft of that spreadsheet. It'll really solidify it for me, because I think I've got enough of the pieces now of the puzzle that if I looked at something, you know, in black and white, I'd be able to sort of piece it back together. I'm sure, Chris, it would help you a lot in terms of.
Right.
It would indeed.
And I recall it, Don, it did include, the debt schedule piece was part of that spreadsheet as well, as I remember. So it was very informative, and necessary to have. So we look forward to getting that.
All right, great, easy enough. I'll send that to Michelle when that's done.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to educate us tonight and answer our
Fantastic.
questions.
Sure,
Appreciate
thanks
it.
for having me. Good to see everybody.
Okay.
Thanks.
You too.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
I think we might have lost Michelle.
We did, yeah. Michelle had to drop off, family thing, I guess. So
Okay.
I can drive the Zoom if you want to direct me, Susan, for who's next, or who you want next.
Sure. Well, Michelle had mentioned, we have fire on the agenda, but she had mentioned that that particular request has been withdrawn.
Yeah, apparently that's going to be, it's under the $10,000 threshold. And apparently the discussion is just to fund it out of free cash rather than coming out of a stabilization special town meeting funding. So if we're okay,
Okay.
we can vote it anyway if we wanted to, but it doesn't really fall into our bucket, strictly
Okay.
speaking.
All right, then I guess we're ready for facilities then. Nick?
Hi, everybody. How are you?
How are you?
Excellent. So this is, we were talking about this one for quite a while. It's kind of finally coming to fruition. It's the replacement of the entire middle high school fire alarm system. So it's an old system, circa 2002-ish, give or take. The biggest problem that we're facing at the moment is the manufacturer for our system discontinued parts. So we are now in that scary stage of an old failing system that we're working off of parts that are just still on shelves. They're not making any new ones. So we've kind of known this was coming. So we started the process of getting a fire alarm engineer in there to take a look at what we have and see which route we were going to be able to do. There were two different ways we could go about it. One is a full replacement, running new wires and all new peripheral units in the building. The other was possibly being able to reuse some of the existing wiring and then add new as needed. So he spent most of the summer kind of doing a findings report, and it's going to be much better to do a full replacement, which is running all new wire to everything. And the reason being, a lot of the detectors, strobes, and all that stuff is like moving 5 to 10 feet here and there, and we're adding a bunch of new in between to meet current codes. So it just doesn't make sense to Frankenstein the project. And then it leads into a whole nother thing that if there's any issues down the line, contractors can say, oh, that's because of the existing wiring. It turns into a nightmare. The good thing that comes along with this is that we're able to do the work and install the entire new system in parallel to a running system. So we're not going to run into that really scary thing of having the building unalarmed while the project was going on. It is going to be more expensive this way, but logistically, it's much better. It will also enable us to do work during the school year. The thought right now, and we've done this before with a different project, was to let the fire alarm companies run second shift 3 to 11, which is great because then it doesn't affect anything during school hours, and we're able to start the project earlier, because trying to fit a full replacement into just a summer is not really gonna work. They could get it done, but then all the bids would come back astronomical, because they'd have to be probably having 2 different shifts running every single day. So that's the overarching what the project is. So in talking with the engineer, based on some recent projects he's done and some cost per square foot, this project is coming in, and this is just a ballpark estimate from him, but like a safe number, all in would be 1.43 million. And that's, he thinks that's on the high end, so that's a safe number in his eyes, based on they just did a project 2 years ago, so they accounted for current going rates and our square footage and what we need in that building. So this would be coming out of the school stabilization fund.
Nick,
And
is this something
So-
that we're gonna have a go out to bid for the whole install, or is this something that you're gonna do the piecemeal thing?
we
with
are
your
gonna go
team?
out to bid for the whole entire project, yep.
Okay.
So Nick, if you just clarify a little bit on the equipment for me,
Mhm.
you said there was a full replacement of wires and peripherals, but what about the brain that is the
Uh,
system?
yeah, sorry, yeah, so literally every single component, brand new, a new panel, a new everything. So,
Okay. Okay.
and more actually, because we don't, not that we don't meet code, but if you start a project like this, you have to bring it up to code. So there'll be
Mhm.
more detectors per foot than what we
Yeah.
currently have. And the newer systems are just a little more smart. We're not there yet, but there'll be some discussions on some different features that you're able to have. You can tie them into different systems the school might have as well. So
Mhm.
there's a much broader aspect to it, but it'll be much
Like the
easier to
cameras
deal
and
with.
stuff like that? Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Maybe not cameras, but yeah, like alarm and just uh like notification type things. So I
Mhm.
think like and don't quote me, but once we get down the line, I know that these integrate too, like lockdown scenario things where they can utilize the fire alarm system for that somehow, but that
Mhm.
was kind of just a side discussion on the new technologies.
Nick,
Okay.
I don't actually think, did you fill out a request form with all this stuff already?
So this
For
one kind
special?
of popped up quick.
That's
No,
fine.
not yet.
I just want to be sure I wasn't missing it, because I was just trying to follow
Yeah,
along if there's other
no,
stuff written down. Okay, fine.
yeah, not quite yet. The reason we're asking it special is if we wait till annual, then it's just a little late, and we actually did not know if it was going to be full replacement or not yet, and if we were going to reuse existing wiring and have the system offline, it was going to have to be a summer project. So we wanted to get ahead of it. Annual town meeting kind of,
Not enough time
yeah, it's just tough,
after annual town meeting to do it. Right.
especially a project of this size. There's going to be a lot of meetings with the fire department, building inspector and the fire alarm company and the engineer. So logistically, we really wanted to have our ducks in a row before we get this project underway and not rush anything.
I personally would love to see a copy of or at least an executive summary of the engineering report that we funded for the $150,000. Again, I probably won't read the whole thing, but at least being able to see sort of the key takeaways would be fantastic.
Yep.
I mean, I appreciate the ballpark figure that the engineering consultant has provided. I guess, how do we find, if we're going for a special town meeting and we're talking about having something in the warrant in the next 2 weeks, how do we choose a number? Because typically you would have been doing this off of something a little bit, at least in my opinion, something a little bit firmer than a ballpark. So I don't know how we get to a firmer number in terms of like what we think is going to be appropriate for a special town meeting.
Yeah, and that's where putting it out to bid gives us our number. So we're gonna put the project out to bid because we don't have to we don't have to engage in a contract when we go out to bid. So it's a findings bid, and we'll pick a contractor from there if the funding was released. It's tough to go out to bid with a project this size without having the funding in place in general.
Yeah, appreciate the 30B process. They
Yeah.
wanted, you've got, they can point to the special, they can point to the article. I appreciate that. I guess I'm just trying to ask, I understand the final answer in terms of pricing is from the 30B process. And you need to be able to demonstrate in that, that purchasing process that you've got the funding committed by the town. I'm asking the question, like, how do we choose a number to put in the warrant article?
I would be using the engineer's estimate, because it's a real world estimate based on square footage. So any other project that he's done recently is roughly right now $6 a square foot. So high schools 200 to 210,000 square feet, and that's where they come up with that number. Now, that number is also inflated a little bit because of contingency. Usually we carry 10%, and a shift differential increase as well. So that takes everything like that into consideration.
Nick, have you been in front of the school facilities committee with this already?
Oh yeah, we've been talking about this for a long time.
Have they voted on a recommendation, or are they going to vote on this? Because we're a little bit downstream of them. I mean, so
Yeah,
I just want to see if they are official.
So the school stabilization fund, when that came about, we sat down and really went over all. The reason it was created was because we knew we had a lot of big ticket items coming. So
Absolutely.
this was number one on the list without even a question. And any meeting or any discussion I've been part of, it was such. So you know, after this project, then we start turning our eyes towards roof projects for schools. So I don't know what their process is voting wise per se. But
I mean, yeah,
I
that's
can reach out to Jason Earls and say,
that's how you explained it. I've got no disagreements at all. I think you explained it perfectly for what the understood priorities were. But typically, I think we want to be downstream of school facilities committee and school committee on this fund to be sure that there's no, everyone's got a chance to ensure this is priority number one. I don't think there's any disagreement there.
yeah,
But just if it comes down to us after it being named first priority from the two committees that are set up to kind of really deal with this, I think that's helpful.
yeah. We just had a capital meeting with the schools, just a preliminary kind of discussion, and this was first and foremost before all the other stuff. So it felt like me that'd be the case.
No, I mean, I appreciate what you're recommending here. I mean, I lived the telephone outage when I was on school committee, and that was a situation where we had waited too long, could no longer find the parts, and we had no telecom system, and we needed to scramble and put in a whole new one simultaneous with running a school. So I appreciate the ability to run parallel, work on this project during the school year, be able to spread out some of the costs instead of running double shifts. All of that works for me. I just, again, for me, I would be helpful to see the engineering report. I would love to see just the funding, the formal funding requests come through. It doesn't take that much time to put it on paper. That would be amazing. Especially with, any of the information that engineers provided about the costing out. You basically already gave it to us at $6 times 200,000 square feet, but 1.4 million is currently, the balance that Don just gave us is 1.5 million. So it's basically the whole game until they straighten out the appropriations and update the balance. So I think it's important for us to have all the paperwork. And then I agree with Corey in terms of it would be helpful if, I don't know how the school facilities works in terms of having a vote. I don't know whether they're actually a voting committee or they make recommendations to the school. I would feel better if I had a vote from the school committee based on a recommendation from the school facilities committee, because I don't think that they have
Agreed.
voting.
I believe they make a recommendation to the school committee. Yeah.
Oh, I think having a school committee vote would be super helpful. And then just the engineering report, the funding request, which includes some of the information. I get the need. It's just sort of buttoning up some of the stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're in a rare.
Anyone have any other questions for Nick?
Ellen's got something.
Hi,
Ellen?
hi, guys. I don't mean to butt in, I'm just listening and learning. But I believe because the fund was created at special town meeting a year ago, there was an immediate deposit to it. So we've had two. I think the fund is at 3 million. The school,
Yeah, that's correct, I think.
the
Well-
school stabilization fund.
Yes, but no. Don just came on and said that what he could see in the general ledger was the 1.5 million. Is it a matter of timing, Ellen? They just haven't closed out fiscal 2024. So while the appropriation is
Right.
there, it's not in the proper account yet. That's my only point, is that
Okay,
We don't want to
Uh,
write checks against an account that we haven't balanced yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
To put it in layman's terms, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Nick. Unless anyone else has any questions, I think if we do get the paperwork that Katie's brought up, that will really help.
Yep.
And, you know, again, since this does come out of a separate bucket that was set up for this purpose, I think that the flexibility in not necessarily having the best number is a little easier, you know, because it's really, this is the only thing and the money's not going to really steal from anything else. So
Right.
I think this is, even though it is a big project, we have a little bit more leeway. I don't want to say we have carte blanche, but we got a little more leeway on this one to kind of guess at a number if we wanted to. So
Mhm.
great.
I just have I mean, I know how we set up our warrant articles, but I guess this is just food for thought, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. In the past, we've only had one bucket that we've been funding capital out of, and it's been the
Mhm.
capital stabilization. And yet we wrote our article for annual town meeting as if that was the way things were gonna happen forever. Because normally, when you look at other things where the cash is coming from multiple sources, it indicates where the funds are coming from. So if there's a way, I guess Ellen, us, when we're putting together the warrant article for the capital improvements budget for a special town meeting, it'd be super helpful to have a big asterisk next to the 1.4 million, indicating that
Yeah.
the 1.4 million is coming from the school stabilization fund, because I think it's gonna get really confusing going forward if we have a big number, but we don't know where it's coming from. It's coming from capital, it's coming from sidewalks, it's coming from schools. It's great, more funding sources, but we're sort of, I think, being able to indicate to the public what is what. And we do that in other articles, so I think it'd be a helpful practice for us to get into.
Well, if I recall the way those funds were written, they do have to go before town meeting to be spent.
Correct. It's a 2/3 vote, but I
Yeah.
guess all I'm suggesting is the way we write the warrant article.
Yeah, like so.
I
for-
think
for-
they'd
to
be
the
done
public.
separately.
Well, they're
Would
part
they
of
not?
no, they're part of the capital improvements project B general fund. They were just kind of,
Mhm.
they were looped in there. So if you're coming at this cold, there's no immediate indication that roads and sidewalks funding was 2 buckets, or that the school study for 150 for the schools came out of a different bucket. So just to kind of go back, and if we can, it would be easier to kind of figure out a way to, you know, maybe we put for the department, we say asterisk stabilization fund, something like that, just to kind of make it clear if you're looking at it cold.
Or just have a column like you do in Article 7 for stabilization. It says from.
Yep.
There's like just to add a column, because it has, right now we just have
Well,
in
it's
a lot of
from
the other
general fund.
articles, we have where the funds are coming from. So we've got
Yeah, that's right.
a listing, 1 through 26, we have department, purpose, amount, capital budget recommendation. I'm just talking about adding a column that says from capital budget stabilization, school stabilization, or sidewalk stabilization.
Yeah.
So it's
We'll break it
clear.
out. Right.
Ellen, not to put you on the spot, are you following what I'm suggesting?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I'll speak with Chris tomorrow.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
again, because like when I was coming in cold, when I read Article 8, it didn't register with me that, you know, two of the big ticket items were actually coming out of a different fund.
Mhm.
Nick, I think we're good with you though.
Yeah, well said.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Have a good night,
Thanks, Nick.
everyone.
Nick, are
Good
you
night.
gonna also, the freezer for, Elder Affairs?
We're not doing that right now, actually. That
Okay.
was, yeah, that was, that's all solved. We're all good.
Okay.
Excellent to hear.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
it's full. Okay,
Yep.
awesome.
Have a
Appreciate
good night.
it. I love that.
Good night.
Bye.
Okay, things are getting easy.
I like when requests disappear.
So we should be working with Chief Quigley. Are you there?
I am here. Hi there.
Hello. How are you?
Congratulations, Susan. Okay, everybody, all right? You all set? And I also have Harrison Schmidt is in here as well. He's our armorer if you have specific questions about what we're trying to do. But I'm looking to repurpose $17,000 from the we received a grant, an earmark grant, a surprise grant from the senator's office, State Senator Pat O'Connor. And that was the suggestion of Mike Dick last year to try to chase that down, and surprisingly it worked out. We haven't taken the funds in yet. I don't have actual control of the funds at this point, but that was able to defray the costs of the rescue UTV that we purchased last year, and we're going to have probably a little bit more than $17,000 left over. So we're trying to accelerate something from the 10-year plan that was due to be funded at annual town meeting. We'd like to do it at special to give us a little bit of head start to knock this, to get this project out of the way. And we want to replace our patrol rifles, which have not been, the ones we use, they're actually on loan from the federal government. It's a project called Project 1033. And they loan us these things. We've had them for about 26 or 27 years now, and they're just pretty worn at this point. From all the training we do, and our armorer tells us it's time to change these out. It was time last year. We deferred it, and like to try to take care of it with these surprise grant funds.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit more about what we're replacing them with? I got the sense that the prior weapons were semi-automatic, or did I read that wrong? And that these are not, or
These are patrol rifles. It's basically the same frame, but the ones we get from the government are actually fully automatic. They're Vietnam era. They were probably in Vietnam. So we when possible we change them back to semi-automatic. We have an armorer, but they're breaking. We're replacing all kinds of parts in there. We just at the range last week and we have them. They're failing, so we need to change them out. Basically the same thing. We're just replacing existing equipment that's coming up.
30 years old.
Yeah.
So I did see it on the 10-year from the currently, and then the one that was a couple years old. It did see the price changed. Looks like you were estimating about $5,000, and is 17 just more, or is it? I'm just looking at two numbers. I'm just, if there's a narrative there, what is it?
If I think you're looking at handguns, Corey, that
No, it was the same tag.
It was, it
that's-
said long rifles.
Yeah, it said long.
yeah, that should have been 15,000, but now
Okay.
it's 17. Yeah, that's weird because the pistols, handguns were 5,000. Must have just got lost in the.
Yeah, the one that I found from 02. Yeah, but that's, I mean, if the narrative was it was 15 and this is expected. I didn't know if there's something that you're able to do with increased funding, or if there's some other explanation there. Not necessarily.
Well, there's definitely new technology out there. The weapons we have now have iron sights, and these ones will have the modern optical sights, and they're not as loud if you have to use them indoors.
Gotcha.
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to do the math here. So what was the size of the grant that you were expecting to receive from Senator O'Connor's work for the UTE vehicle?
$25,000. We had 28,300 appropriated at annual town meeting for the UTV and trailer.
Yep.
Right.
And unfortunately, the way, the process is, we get a quote for these things in like October and November, and we don't actually purchase them till August.
A year later.
Yeah, exactly. So they did go up. So I spent closer to $30,000. There's actually still a bill outstanding. And so that 25,000 will defray that. I expect to be about $17,000 or $18,000 left over.
Okay.
We're
Yeah, I think
actually okay.
No, I was just saying, I think to Katie's point, if this is your point, Katie, obviously we want to avoid trying to spend money that hurts us later on, and just ensuring that this is money that's truly being reappropriated really makes us, make a lot more sense.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's been on the plan for years, and it's been a long time coming, and it's just something we have to do. Yeah, I'm not really a giant gun guy, but I have someone who is, and he tells us it's time.
Got to do your job.
Okay. I don't have any other specific questions about the equipment itself or the process of utilizing the excess funds. Does anyone have anything else they want to discuss?
Utilizing the funds at special like this, I don't have a problem with that either. I think this is just fine, especially if it allows us to get ahead of a project.
Yeah,
We
especially
actually
since
may
this
not
one
even-
has been out there for so long. It's not like this is just a brand new idea. This is
Yeah,
something
that's where
been
I'm
on the-
at. If it was a brand new idea, I'd have a different opinion, but since it's been on the capital plan and been a stated need, we're just sort of pulling it forward because we can match
Mhm.
it.
And
essentially.
this is a technical question for you guys, or maybe Ellen, but I'm not sure. Does it have to go to town meeting?
Yes, it does.
Or just okay.
Yeah, because the only body that can spend money is town meeting, and we
Okay.
spent the money on the ATV. We're not allowed to re-spend it on anything else except for what we said it was on. So
Gotcha.
until town meeting says otherwise.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a, I don't know, I've seen Sam do it in the past in terms of how he worked the warrant language so that it was clear that we were basically reclassifying appropriation from the UTV to a different one, but we do have to bring the vote to reclass the appropriation because it literally goes on the balance sheet as spending against UTVE, and if there's a
Forever.
balance, yeah, it's forever trapped in that account. So we want to
Buy
move
some
money for you.
buy some shiny wheels for the ATV, right?
Right, exactly. Spinners for the.
Yes, that's still a thing.
No, I'm comfortable with it. Yeah, I don't have any other questions.
Either.
All right. Well, thank you.
And Chief,
Thank
yeah,
you.
what we decided to do is just kind of do a final vote at one of our final meetings. So us not voting tonight is not an indication of anything. We're just probably gonna get some more information on the numbers for other things and then just kind of send it all in one batch. So
Gotcha. No problem. All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right,
Thanks
Thanks,
so
Chief.
much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Flying through this. Nice job, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so we still won't have Ralph, I think, by next week. Hopefully we will have Francine.
Can they
So is there-
vote on stuff that they haven't heard deliberations on? I don't know how you guys work that. I know with things like the zoning, you have to be on the meeting in order to vote.
Mhm.
We haven't had that restriction before, but also this is recorded, so we'll send the meeting recording links.
Okay.
And, I think there's some topics that are probably, as we get into the back and forth for annual, yeah, this time around, I think these are all pretty straightforward once we get the numbers that we're looking for.
Yep.
Sorry, Susan, I interrupted you. My apologies.
No, I feel the same way. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
Okay.
So, So we'll just hold, for them to get back and give them the opportunity to listen to the meeting, and maybe if they had additional things to add, we'll listen to that, and then we'll vote.
Do we have, what's our next meeting? Do we have one penciled in for next Monday?
Do,
We did have one penciled in, and I think we should keep it.
yeah.
So I'll, Michelle's
we
not
can
here anymore, but I'll make sure that Michelle gets that onto the docket.
Yeah, I mean, if we could have the stuff from Nick so that we could just, again, review it. And then have a.
Yeah, I was
Do we have
surprised
a-
that the report didn't make it onto the drive, the one that was already done. I was hoping that would make it on.
Do you want to just spend a moment to just review and sync up on stuff we need? So for facilities, we need the report and the formal request,
Mhm.
and then some sort of statement of an estimate methodology, at least. I think
Yep.
that's probably a good bar.
I think
Okay,
that goes in the formal request, though. It's usually like an appendix or something to the formal request, isn't it? Isn't there like a pricing?
yeah, if there is, I just want to make it
Yeah,
explicit.
it is.
Yeah, just, rather than, this is our best estimate, just encourage,
The best math possible.
including, and how you whatever the methodology is, include that too, right? So, okay. And then working backwards for police, I don't think we needed anything additional. For the stabilization funds, we wanted the fund balance. That's a big one.
Right.
Yes.
Or at least date they're available. Okay.
Right, you wanted the fund balances, we wanted to know that the school committee was, supporting the item. And then we need the memo from Don that shows the breakdown of how the funds, the analysis of the capital stabilization fund that we used to always get. So it'd be
Yeah.
nice to see that again.
It would be.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Fund balances. Was there anything else from Don's conversation? The balances, we're just gonna shake the trees on free cash.
I was about to say,
Please.
I think we should put in a formal request for free cash. It's, we may not, I'm sure we're among many that are asking that question, but I'd like to formally raise our hand. It is an important part of us figuring out our fund balance for fiscal 26.
Oh yeah, and to that point, discussion of fund growth in
Right.
10-year, 5-year plan.
Yeah. I mean,
That
yeah,
may be just something that can be fixed offline. That may not be a meeting thing, but that's something that's a task for next week as well.
maybe what I would suggest is perhaps like since we have a light load in terms of just the votes that we have to do, maybe we use a meeting in November to sort of draft something, or at least kick around what we would want in that policy so that we could write something up.
Mhm.
And I'd be happy, I mean, I've written a couple of these, I'd be happy to sort of scribe something so that we could, instead of just talking in generalities, like be able to show the select board or show advisory, here's what we're thinking, and open a conversation. Because I do think it is a conversation that we could have simultaneous or even prior to the meat of the fiscal 2026
Mhm.
budget process.
Wonderful.
That's a good idea.
Also,
Appreciate you doing that.
Yep. Also, debt policy is one of the other ones that popped up too.
Mhm.
So, not that really need to, but again, policies are it's hard to write policies when you don't need them, and you wish you had them when you do need them. So that's one of those things.
Well, I think it's actually an interesting entree because it's like they actually have to consider rewriting the overall financial policy related to stabilization funds, because we now have 2 new, and they need to clarify whether
Yeah.
the, in the numerator, whether it's just still general stabilization and capital, or it's general stabilization, capital plus schools, and like, so they almost kind of have to work on the general stabilization one, so like, why not do that plus talk about a new one for capital at the same time? It's sort of it's a
Well
net
phrased.
entree to have both conversations. One we control and one we're just making a observation or recommendation on. And I can dig up the general stabilization one and I'll circulate it. I have that somewhere. I know what he's talking about. I just haven't read it in a really long time. Because I think they did those, gosh, back in 2014. It's been a good decade. I want to say it's like 2014 when they put in place some of those financial policies. So it's like perhaps time for a refresher there.
Yeah.
So, Chris, any questions
Okay.
from tonight? This is a good intro to kind of how this stuff usually works and what these meetings look like. Just general feedback or?
No, I've got a lot of specific questions, technical. I've taken some notes. I don't know who I'm going to hound for follow-up on this, Corey. You may be the first in line. Sorry about that.
That's fine. But yeah, when it comes to myself, all of us here, email any of us. We all know.
Okay.
If it's really number stuff, choose the other two. So.
or like, or you can meet with people offline. I guess what are we, a quorum of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've got 6 of us, so you can have
we have 5 plus 1.
5 plus 1. So again,
one doesn't count. Yeah, there's only we have to be under 5 for the 6th to count. So
yes, exactly. So anyway, so you could ask 2 of us to get together with you in person and hammer 2 of us.
Well, I would like eventually, I'm an old-fashioned person. I would like eventually to meet everybody in person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to meet in person too around any questions you have.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of, I know we have the STM in front of us right now, but in terms of the liaison work, Katie or Corey, I think it was you who said you were going to reach out to the superintendent.
yeah, I sent an email with including myself, school committee chair, vice chair, Katie, and the superintendent, just introducing ourselves and trying to just have a open line of conversation. We got a thank you email back. The school's obviously, like every year, running through a variety of challenges, so they were encouraged by the ability to kind of start this process earlier. So we've already started to talk.
Okay, great, excellent. All right then. All right, I have a list of what I need to mention to Michelle to get onto the next agenda, and items that we're looking for follow-up on, which I'll also include in my email to Michelle, just so she can help, push people along and get those items to us. But other than that, I guess we will be back on the 28th.
Yep.
For our next meeting, same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you guys normally vote specific warrant language, or are you just voting numbers? The only reason I ask is with the police one, it is a little technical in terms of like how that, again, I don't remember how they did that in terms of transferring numbers, but are you guys, I guess I'll stand with my question. Are you voting numbers or are you voting warrant articles when you vote?
We often don't have the final warrant article
Okay.
when we vote.
But our votes do reflect the nuances of a funding. So we will vote a funding line that includes or does not include a reallocation or including funds previously.
Right.
Like we had $100,000 that came in from something else, which is already allocated. So we had to do a funding request that included the $100,000, but explicitly say in our vote that the new funding was only X minus $100,000. So
Right.
it kind of, yes would be the answer to your
Yeah, and
question,
we've done that on items that we voted on that had a potentiality to be reimbursed by grants, and so yeah, we do include that in our vote.
Okay, I got you. So it's the number plus verbiage around funding that then gets wrapped into the formal warrant language that presumably somebody reviews before they hit the print button. Okay,
Well,
that makes sense to me.
A
Okay.
couple meetings ago, maybe not so much, but yes, we've been better.
Yeah, exactly. It's all
Okay,
gonna
then.
come
Nothing
together.
nothing like editing, grammar on town meeting floor. Surreal.
I was about to say, like, please help me.
Yeah.
Mm.
All right, then, if we don't have anything else, then we can
I'll move
have
to
a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second. Okay, roll call vote. Chris?
Agree? Adjourned or yay or,
Aye.
Aye or yay, whatever you want.
Aye.
Yeah, or yes.
sorry.
Cory?
Cravens, aye.
Katie Dugan, aye.
Susan Franklin, aye.
All right, guys.
All right, everybody.
Thank you,
Have a great
everybody.
night.
Thank
You too.
you.
Good night.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Good night.
All right, bye-bye.